Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. A long-awaited report was released last week about the transition from our current over-the-air television technology to the new one called ATSC 3. You can check out the full report linked here on screen at Lon.TV/ATSC3 Report 2025. This report consisted of working groups that represented a wide swath of the over-the-air television interest groups. That includes, of course, the broadcasters, the cable and satellite companies, consumer groups. Public Knowledge was the one looking out for consumers, along with a number of manufacturers and a few other organizations, and the FCC. And the bottom line here with this report, which we'll look at as we work our way through the video today, is that ATSC 3 is kind of stuck in a holding pattern. We've got a real chicken and egg problem with adoption, a lot of it because of DRM, but there are some other roadblocks that we're going to be looking at as well. So lots to unpack here from this report that doesn't say a lot in over 60 pages. Now, before we dive into the report today, I do have a word from our sponsor, ExpressVPN. So this week's video is being brought to you by ExpressVPN. I am currently lounging here on my couch about to watch some Netflix. And one of the advantages of using ExpressVPN is that you can actually get more out of the streaming services that you're paying for. So for example, I've got Netflix up here on screen. I did a search for a movie here in the United States just on my regular internet connection, and that movie is nowhere to be found on Netflix. But if I go over to the ExpressVPN client on my Android TV device and click over to a different country, in this case the UK, I am now popping out across the pond, and I'm getting access to content that I didn't have before. Now, to switch countries, it's super easy. Just take out your remote control, go to the ExpressVPN app, and switch your out point, and you are good to go. If you're using an Android TV or Fire TV stick on the road, you can connect to your home country so you can get access to all of your content, even if you're somewhere else in the world. Super simple, super easy. They've got 24/7 support as well. There are native clients for the Apple TV, the Fire TV devices, and Android TV devices. And you can get 4 months for free by going to expressvpn.com/Lon.TV or scanning the barcode on screen. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you are not satisfied, you can try out the service without having to pay a dime. I want to thank ExpressVPN for their support of the channel, and now let's get back to this week's topic. So what's the TLDR on this report? The too long didn't read. Well, there is consensus in a couple of areas. One is that no transition date should be recommended at this time. The FCC was looking at 2027 as the time in which they would turn off ATSC 1.0 and require everything be broadcast over the ATSC 3 standard. None of the stakeholders recommend doing that at this time. The reason is that they all agree that consumer adoption is challenging and remains expensive. So at the moment, only really top-end TVs have the ATSC 3 tuners, although some of the lower-cost ones are getting them, but we're still not down to the bottom of the market yet. And as you'll see in a few minutes, there's also expenses on the cable and satellite side for implementing ATSC 3 as well. And they all recommend continuing this market-driven approach to the transition. They don't want the FCC setting a deadline, although the incoming chairman of the FCC has indicated that the TV spectrum might be better used as some kind of broadband data pipe. He said this on a number of occasions. You can see some remarks he made at an NAB event back in 2020. I don't think his opinion has changed at all, and he sees this as an opportunity, especially at the edges of networks, to move high-speed downloads out to places where they currently don't have access to high-speed data. And just this past week, a number of broadcasters got together to look at how ATSC 3 might be used as a wireless data delivery service for commercial operations. So they are definitely hedging their bets here on the broadcast side. And it might be because this new chairman could very well say, hey, you know what? 2027 is the date. If it works as TV, great. If it doesn't, let's reallocate spectrum to something more usable. And we will have to see how this plays out. But I don't anticipate the chairman delaying this transition any more than it already has been delayed. And because everyone wants the market to drive it, the market will decide very quickly here. But unfortunately, the broadcasters have made some very poor market decisions. And speaking of the market, one of the single biggest revenue sources for broadcasters now, exceeding advertising in some markets, are the retransmission fees that broadcasters collect from cable and satellite providers. We customers, of course, pay those fees upstream to the cable provider, who then pays the broadcaster. In my state, it is $36 a month just for local stations. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But cable and satellite providers are pushing back in a big way on this report because of the costs that they are going to have to incur to implement ATSC 3. Right now, most cable providers are transmitting the ATSC 1.0 broadcast to their customers after they've re-encoded those broadcasts. And what they're talking about here is expense across the entire distribution line. So one issue are having to upgrade all of their head-end equipment so that they can be able to receive and retransmit or re-encode that ATSC 3 signal. DRM makes that more difficult for them because they also have to re-encrypt that signal and make sure it stays protected all the way down to the customer. Additionally, all of the set-top boxes out in the field may not be capable of actually displaying the ATSC 3 content because you've got HEVC encoding now as the default. Many boxes support that, but I'm sure there are a lot out there that don't. HDR and wide color gamut is part of the ATSC 3 standard. You have to be able to get that signal to work on a regular television that doesn't support HDR as well. So there's a lot of things that these set-top boxes have to do that they may not be able to do right now out in the field without having to replace them or force the customer to pay more to get a replacement box. And there's another issue with audio formats, and that includes the secondary audio streams as well, because ATSC 3 adopted Dolby AC4 audio encoding for broadcast. And as we saw on the consumer side, most consumer set-top boxes don't support AC4. Only the more expensive ones do. At the moment, I think the least expensive AC4 box out there is the Fire Stick 4K from Amazon. I might be wrong that there might be a few others now, but most of the lower-end set-top boxes don't support AC4 audio directly. And many set-top boxes that these cable and satellite providers give to their customers don't support it either. And cable and satellite providers are also concerned about the law. Section 614 of the Communications Act says that the cable providers have to provide a signal without material degradation. And because ATSC 3 has so many different options available to the broadcaster for their signal, the cable and satellite providers are concerned they may not be able to meet each one of those without having to re-encode a 4K signal to a 1080p signal, for example. So there's still a lot here that has to be considered before things get turned over. But from reading this report, it's very clear that the cable and satellite industry really hasn't started on the transition yet, primarily because of cost and how much money they're having to pay to the broadcasters through their customers to be able to even carry these networks in the first place. So it'll take a while if this transition is going to happen to get those cable and satellite providers ready to go. Then we've got the DRM issue, of course. And I have to say I was really disappointed to see that consumer perspective on DRM was not represented in this report at all. Public Knowledge, who was the group representing consumers, along with the Consumers Union, who writes the Consumer Reports magazine, nobody really pushed back on DRM, nor was there any acknowledgement of the thousands of you who have filed on the docket telling the FCC that encrypting over-the-air TV is a bad idea. That said, there were some things that came out in the report that are worth talking about. The first thing I want to talk about here with DRM is how the broadcasters continue to mislead the FCC and the public. The latest example is this line in the report where they conflate their signing technology with the encryption. So what broadcasters can do on any ATSC 3 channel, even if it's not encrypted, is put a signature into the signal to ensure that the signal being received came from the broadcaster. This is a good feature. I think it's important that people have peace of mind to know that they're not receiving some hijacked signal here, but are getting the actual signal signed by the broadcaster. But you don't need to encrypt your entire channel to do it. You can just send out this cryptographic data to the receiver and have it decrypt that little signal to know that the channel is legit. So they conflate the two here by saying that this cryptographic technology also enables broadcasters to employ DRM. That is not the case. They can, again, sign their broadcast without having to encrypt the entire channel. They then put in a PowerPoint presentation that is a regurgitation of things that they've been saying all along here, that because the rest of the internet has DRM, they should as well. But let's look at how the internet enables DRM in other applications. Netflix is a great example. Is there anything that Netflix doesn't run on? No, Netflix runs on everything. Yes, it's encrypted, but it doesn't really matter to the consumer because they're not inconvenienced. Netflix is smart enough to know that if they have their client available on every single device that they can think of, they will be able to get their customers to retain their subscriptions to Netflix and keep watching. They don't inconvenience consumers. The problem is the broadcasters have gone out of their way to inconvenience consumers when it comes to picking up their encrypted signals. At the moment, if you go to the Next Gen TV site and look up televisions that have a built-in ATSC3 tuner, you won't find a lot of cheap TVs in there. And by the way, nearly every single one of these TVs is running Google or Android TV. Why? Because that is currently the only operating system that can decrypt the signal. There's a couple of Fire TVs in there, but those are Android-based. And I will, in fairness, say that Samsung Tizen OS does have the ability on a few of their models to decode ATSC3 signals, but that is it. They have severely limited the number of devices that can be out in the market right now, because if it's not running Android for the most part, you can't decrypt the TV signal. And I was also surprised to see that the broadcasters are still talking about this alleged home gateway device specification that was announced a year ago, back in February of 2024. I ask, where is it? Because the A3SA, who put out this press release, actually took this off their website. And in the course of announcing this, they also promised support for Apple devices and other things beyond Android, but none of that has materialized. Where we are right now, at the end of January 2025, is that there is not a single gateway device on the market that can take an encrypted signal and allow it to be watched on some device within the home. Right now, I can take an unencrypted signal on my HDHomerun and also now on the Zapper box and watch it on multiple devices, but that is not the case for the encrypted signals because only Android is allowed to decrypt this encrypted content right now, but the unencrypted stuff can work on just about anything. And of course, many of us already have boxes in the home that are fully capable of decoding everything that ATSC3 provides, including the AC4 audio, but broadcasters continue to restrict our ability to do that. And one would think with this huge issue of consumer adoption looming overhead, wouldn't it make sense to make it more convenient for people to use the devices that they have already to decrypt the content so they can be watching this stuff right now and get that transition done quicker? I also found it rather humorous that a slide that A3SA included in this report to the FCC actually has an Apple TV featured, but Apple TV is simply not compatible with the DRM right now. Now, there were some consensus recommendations, which are the obvious ones, that they have to get the cost of these converter devices down so more customers can get them, but that seemed to be the only area of agreement. And what kills me is that if you look at the list of adopters of A3SA's security protocol, Silicon Dust, the makers of the HDHomerun, and BitRouter, the makers of the Zapper box, are both on here, yet their gateway devices don't decrypt the content. And if you look at sales here, this was a recent screen grab I got on Amazon right before Christmas. The Silicon Dust Flex 4K ATSC3 tuner is outselling the next best-selling device, the Zinwell box, by a factor of 10 to 1. So clearly, people who are buying equipment to tune ATSC3 prefer a gateway to a tuner. And we're not talking about millions of customers here, but still a very big gap here between people looking for a simple tuner versus people looking for the freedom and flexibility to use a gateway device. And what's nice about a device like the HDHomerun and what the Zapper box will soon let you do as well is that you buy one of them and then all of your other devices can just access it with an app. But again, there are no apps that are allowed to decrypt the signal, even on devices that could very easily play back ATSC3 content. We're now 2 years into this encryption experiment, It's clear that it's not working. It is preventing people from adopting ATSC 3 technology because they can't watch TV the way they want to. And I think we're at a point here where this is putting the entire transition at risk. But if that's the direction they choose, I guess so be it. And I don't think Brendan Carr is going to be waiting all that much longer for them to get their act together. If you want to file a comment with the FCC on this, you can go to Lon.TV/FCC instructions to learn how to do it and join the thousands of other people who have made their voices heard on this particular topic. And unfortunately, here we are again talking about how ATSC 3 remains stuck, and it's been interesting to read this report and see just how stuck it is. That'll do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon Seidman. Thanks for watching.